Hey, what's up everyone? This is Kurt, bringing my very first video for the Lionshare Poker Academy. Now we're just going to do something pretty simple today. I'm just going to do a live play review of a session I played about a week ago, just to give you guys an idea about how I approach poker and my thought process and just what I was thinking in the moments here. And these hands are pretty fresh in my mind, so I'm pretty sure I'll remember what I was actually thinking in each moment. Yeah, in the future, we'll probably break these down a little more just to see how on or off I was about the assumptions that I've made, but we'll do those in separate videos. So we'll make this into a two-part series, and we'll allow you guys to ask us any kind of questions that you have over any hands that come up here, or just anything in general in the Discord section. I'll be happy to answer anything. With 8 tables, the action is going to be pretty fast. So if I look over a few things, please forgive me. As I said, feel free to ask about any hands that you see here in the Discord section, and I'll happily answer them for you. So we're just going to start the video right now, and I'll stop when I feel necessary to break down a hand a little more. But I'm going to try to fly through this as quickly as I can, so we make sure we get everything in. So yeah, let's start off. We'll call tables 1 through 4 on the top left. So we got 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then the bottom 4 will be 5, 6, 7, and 8. So table 7, we start with a limp call with a 10-3 suited. I think that's pretty standard here. Now we have the option to check call or check raise. I think both options are just fine. I believe we decide to check call. Table 4, we go for the limp with the king 8. We can also open there, but limping is certainly fine as well. With our king high, we're probably just looking to show down here. We have pretty good showdown value, and we could also pick off some potential bluffs with our king high. Table 7 versus a pretty large bet. I'm not sure if we're allowed to continue here. I mean, maybe we're supposed to. This could be a little too tight, but I'd be much more willing to continue with, say, the queen high flush draw or a flush draw with a straight draw, obviously. But yeah, could be a little tight, but I think it's a fine fold. And we're actually going to go for some thin value on table 4. I think we need to be value betting more than just 9x, ace-x, and 3x here. And our king high is likely a very strong hand in that specific situation, so I expect to get called by some queen, jack, and maybe even 10x sometimes. So I think that's fine, because we certainly want to be bluffing our worst hands that have no showdown there. Table 5, this is kind of close, and this is why I'm going to be happy to be using simple preflop pretty soon. It's a software that I'm about to buy that will allow us to solve multi-way spots as accurately as possible. So that being said, I believe this hand is fine. We can basically do all 3 options. I'm fine with betting small here. I'm fine with check raising or check calling. I just decided to go for the bet here. Versus a raise here, I'm going to make a pretty tight fold. I think with the ace of hearts, I would continue, but in an $11 tournament, I don't think that somebody's going to find the appropriate bluff raises multi-way, so I'm fine making a tight fold in that spot. Table 1, I open with the ace-jack, get called in 2 spots. This is a pretty bad board for my range, and especially 3-handed. We have to lower our continue betting range, and certainly be checking at very high frequency. Now, once it checks on the turn as well, I think our hand is probably good enough to show down. This turn bet is actually a little perplexing to me, because I think if he does have some 7x or delayed 8x here, he probably wants to be betting on the bigger side. So this looks like he's kind of almost like protection betting, like a pocket 3s or some other ace high he's just trying to take the pot down with, but kind of a strange bet, I think, on his part. Probably a tight fold on my part as well, but I don't hate myself for it or anything. Table 2, we are basically checking the size of our stack when we implement the bounty, and any questions you guys have about bounties later, I'm not going to get into it too much, but feel free to ask us about these. So essentially we have 24 big blinds right here, but it's really like we have closer to 16 big blinds. So with 16 big blinds, I'm mostly just jamming the cutoff with ace queen offsuit. Table 1, we call versus a min raise versus a small blind, and which I don't think is a good size. I think it should be 3.5 to 4xing here when we're this deep. Also a pretty bad board for him to be continuation betting, so when I see him betting a board that's bad for him, I'm going to play it cautiously and just call. A really small bet on the turn here, which I also don't think is a thing. Clearly, I think we have a fun player here. So, but a pretty easy decision with a call here. I mean, you could argue raising for protection, but I think calling is standard. And then once it gets to the river, we're going to have a lot of like missed straight draws and one diamond draws. So we're going to have plenty of bluffs here. So that being said, we need to be bluffing more or value betting more than queen X and flushes. So I think a 9X is a pretty easy bluff candidate or a value bet candidate. I probably also consider value betting some 6X with a diamond in it. And he snap folds. I think we'd actually bet bigger there too, but I think that he's probably weaker than most people would be in that spot. I'm going to pause this real quick because I think we're about to check raise on table 5 here, which is kind of an odd spot because we ISO'd versus 2 limps, and then the big blind was the only one who came along with it. This is a pretty bad board for our opening range here, for our ISOing range in the small blind. So I'm going to check here quite often. Now, I believe check calling and check raising are both fine options here. I decided to go for the check raise, which is, I believe it's fine. I don't think there's a big EV loss between check calling and check raising. I just think folding would clearly be the worst play. So I think I check raise and I get jammed on, and we have to fold, obviously. So I'll run that spot if it's possible with the 2 limpers and me having to ISO. So ranges are just basically going to be pretty tight here. So maybe I'll try to run that if you guys want to see that hand done in the calculator. Table 3, we decided to open from early position with the king 10 suited. We got called in 3 spots. We decided to check flop, which is actually a pretty good board for us. Even though our c-betting range is supposed to be very small, and when we're facing 3 other opponents, this is still a pretty good board for us. I think we're pure bet with the ace king and the king queen, and then start mixing my king 9 through king jack, just so we have some strong king X in our range, and then we also save ourselves when we do run into the king jack king queen here sometimes. So when we bet the turn, we're going to be pretty polar here. I think our only draws are going to be flush draws essentially, and then like our king X and our full houses here. So we certainly want to be pretty polarized when we're betting into 3 people here. So that means we're going to bet a larger size. I think anywhere up to pot would probably be fine, but I don't think the overbet would be appropriate. I don't really want to be overbetting with flush draws, and we could already potentially be dead. And then when we get to this river, we essentially have 0 bluffs. Like our only semi bluffs on the turn are flush draws. So now the flushes get there. So when we have no bluffs, we really need to be betting on the smaller size. So that's why you see me going for a small bet here. I think when we bet big, we allow our opponent to hero fold. Even some 8X sometimes, but certainly hero fold flushes here when he's calling. So I think the small size is really the only size we can use. And I'm not 100% sure. This is just my opinion. I'll 100% run this hand in a simple 3-way and see just how accurate I was with my assumptions there. Table 4, we c-bet the ace jack on the jack 7-5 monotone flop. I'm sure checking is a thing, but I'm fine with betting. Just because our hand obviously is good a lot of the times, and it also needs a lot of protection. So I'm fine with the bet, and would probably even fold versus a check raise, just because I don't think people would be bluffing the appropriate amount. So I think we make life pretty easy for ourselves when we just go for the c bet. And then versus this big bet, where I perceive our villain doesn't have a whole lot of bluffs, although he certainly could be, but I don't think he has much. So I think we have a pretty easy fold. Table 6, we open the pocket 7s and get called in 2 spots. I think I was deliberating between c-betting and checking. I think both are fine. This is a pretty dry board, so pretty good for our range. But we're also into 2 opponents, and we pretty much are in give-up mode all the time on most turn cards here. So I don't think there's a huge difference between checking and betting on the flop. Versus this, I think we have a very easy fold, on the turn, even if small blind folds. Table 1, we c-bet the jack 8 of hearts on the ace king 8. I think we can pure c-bet our range there for a small size and just print money. Table 2, obviously easy ISO. Table 7, we could either call or raise here with queen 10. We decided to call. And table 4, unfortunately, we're gonna have to call this, although I think people are pretty nutted in the spot a lot. So, but with king jack for that size, I think we have to call here. And I think I make a tight fold with the queen 10, but I think it's fine to sandwich in between 2 opponents. We're in the worst position at the table, so I don't mind folding there. And versus this very small bet, he does have a massive range advantage on us, and we are kind of dead a lot when we hit our king, because he's still going to have ace king, king queen there a lot. I do think it's still a tight fold, but I wouldn't be surprised if we don't just pure or if we mix calls and folds there. So a little on the tight side on table 4. Table 3, we have an interesting spot. We call 6-5 in the small blind versus an open, and we get a check on a board where I think villain can bet a pretty high frequency for a small size quite often. So when he checks, I'm thinking he really only has, like for his nutted hands, he just has quads, pocket queens, and then maybe he checks aces sometimes, but I doubt it. So I really think we obviously have the nuts with not only our 5x, but even I think like queen jack could essentially be the nuts, because I think he's really, if he has a checking range here, it's going to be basically sixes through jacks and then weak queen x. So and obviously queen jack plus beats all of that. So I would even choose to overbet with queen jack here. Very easy shove on the river, I think. And we're going to hope to get called by those hands that I said, either the weak queen x or the sevens through the jacks. Table 1, we opened the queen 10 suited and got called in 2 spots. Decided to check flop, which I think is fine. Now I'm just contemplating between check call and check raise. I think without the backdoor flush draw, it makes it better check call, and then we could raise with the backdoor flush draw because our hand would play better in later streets. And we do get called by queen something. I don't know what that is. Queen 8, queen 9, something like that. So we get max value with our 6-5 there. On the turn, I think we're about to face something kind of funky, something I don't agree with. He bets really small, and then we get a snap call from the small blind as well. So a few things. I don't think the small blind ever has a better hand than us. I think his timing tells us pretty bad. He has either some sort of flush draw or some 8x he's not giving up versus bet size. Also, when the button decides to double barrel, he should really be polarizing his range, because once he decides that his hand is good enough to continue on the turn, those should really be like his strong flush draws and his queen x. So when he has a much more narrow range, he should be betting for a bigger, more polarized size. So I think this is also a mistake from the big blind, and I think he also just never has a queen here either. So it's just 2 weaker players playing the hands pretty face up, I think. So I'm going to raise this hand almost always. We need to start getting value with our hand, and we essentially have the nuts here. We can protect versus flush draws. So very easy raise here, I think. Table 4, we decided to check call with the king-queen high for a very small size. Villain should be betting this flop quite aggressively, and our king high could still be good here. Come showdown, I also expect him to bluff some king or queen x rivers that are obviously great for our hand, and I think our hand's maybe just strong enough to show down here. And then in table 1, we are going to be jamming here and hopefully get called by the 9s through 10s. And he actually has a queen here, which really surprised me quite a bit. I mean, it's fine because random people are going to do random things, so I don't think that's completely outside the realm of possibility of him having a queen, but I really didn't think he should have. The king-queen, I actually think is probably a pretty close spot when he bets that small. I think we only have to call 1 out of 5 times for our hand to be good. That's obviously going to include a lot of ace-high calls. So I'll actually run that, and table 4 might be a little closer than I thought with the king-queen on the river there. So we'll take a look at that and see how close that was. We only have to be right 1 out of every 5 times for it to be a proper call. So I think king x might fall into that category. We'll take a look later though. With the pocket jacks, pretty bad board for our range, but since we're playing 2 weaker opponents and we have a pretty strong hand that would fare pretty well from betting for protection and value, this would normally be a flop I would check pretty frequently, but in hindsight, I wish I had bet in this spot. As played, with this very small bet on the turn, I mean, we can't allow him to bet for the small. He's going to be block betting, some pocket 5s through 7, some ace 4, ace 3, maybe some just random ace x here, some ace 7. He could be doing this with, so we have to punish this small bet size. If he bet bigger, we would have just called. Table 1, pretty easy limp raise here with the pocket 9s. At this stack depth, we're going to be limping the majority of our range here, just so we're not bloating pots out of position. Table 8 is probably not as close as some may think it is. I think it's a pretty easy fold. I start thinking if ace queen becomes a fold, maybe I'll run that spot in ICMizer and see if it's just 9s or 10s plus ace king, or if it's more ace queen suited pocket 9s. But I think versus just the buttons jam, we would have ended up ISOing, but that's not just me in hindsight because he has ace-6 suited. I think our ace-queen would have been strong enough to go. So we'll run that in a couple different ways in another video as well. Table 5, we're going to go for the 3-bet here with the ace-7 suited. I think we can either call or 3-bet. I don't think it's a big difference one way or the other. Versus a 4-bet jam, we obviously have to fold. So yeah, apologies if this is going a little too fast for you guys. I'm just trying to get in as much as I can. Like, you can obviously, stop it and rewind it as much as you need to. And again, as I said, please feel free to, message us in the Discord if you have any questions over, anything that you guys have seen here. So I'm more than willing to answer anything you guys have. So King Jack here on table 3 is, this is obviously a fold. This guy should have a really strong range here. He should essentially be jamming his entire range because he has less than 7 big blinds, I think, in hindsight when you factor in the bounty. So, I just think that this is either, a really strong hand or just some crap that he's trying to steal with and doesn't, realize the whole bounty effect. I think that's ace-8. I'm not sure. So he should clearly just be jamming this pre-flop. He's going to be get called by far worse hands than the hand that he showed up with. He ran into jacks, but for the bounty, people are going to call him pretty light there in a spot where he's going to be happy to just get it in pre-flop with ace-8 suited. And again, I'm not sure how many bounty tournaments you guys are playing on Stars and GG. They're pretty common, but I know on ACR or Black Chip, whichever skin you're using, you don't see a whole lot of them. So again, ask us if you guys have any questions over bounty strategy. Now the table 7, pretty easy 3-bet here. I'm not sure when we start, maybe pocket 9s is the strongest hand we end up flatting here. Maybe even 10s could mix, but when we have this guy covered, I'm basically going to play my value hands as strongly as possible because anything I'm happy stacking off with pre-flop, I'm probably going to play aggressively here just so I can play for the bounty. It's very easy c-bet here. I'm going to be c-betting my range on a board where we just have a massive equity advantage here. And on the turn, I think our hand is still strong enough where we can bet small and jam river, we're not really worried about a whole lot. And also by betting small on the turn, this allows us to have some double barrel bluffs that aren't for the all-in size, which I think a lot of people miss out on. So I'm pretty happy with the way I play my hand there. I think it would just jam pocket 9s, pocket 10s, maybe even jacks without a spade, stuff like that. So we're still going to have jams on the turn, but that hand, I think in particular with the spade and only really fearing a queen or an ace, if he somehow double floats those, I think it's a pretty good bet on the turn there. So we got a first moment of dead time, and then as soon as I bring that up, we got the king-queen suited on table 2. Table 6, very easy fold here with the pocket 3s. Too many people in front of us. Our hand plays poorly. We're unlikely to be playing our hand in position, which disadvantages us as well. Again, you can see me checking my bounties on table 2 and table 4, or my stacks when I include the bounty. I think table 4 is essentially going to be what do I have? 3150. So this is I have around 7 or 8 bigs, and I think table 2 I had around maybe a 9 to 10 big stack when you factor in the bounty. So these are very important concepts that if you guys are playing bounty tournaments, we will have to cover if you guys have any questions on those. So as much information as there is out there on bounty stuff, there are still people very, very much not playing the bounties in a correct way. And we lose the king jack to the king jack on table 4. We'll replace that real quick. Table 7, obviously going to open the ace king offsuit. Not too much to say about that. And versus the size, that is not a thing here. I would instantly mark this player as a recreational. He should either be calling or jamming here. What we're supposed to do in this spot, I think I want to 3-bet to a non-all-in size, but I also want to 3-bet an amount where small blind isn't allowed to come along because he's worried about me 4-bet jamming or. So yeah, he's gonna call here, and I think pocket seven. This is fine. Like he should be pure jamming here, and it's just his size is not a thing. I mean, he's obviously gonna get called by worse hands than what he has, as you can see here. But yes, I would instantly mark this person as a recreational. And these are the little things that you guys are gonna want to notice. Like when you see a lot of limping and a lot of bad pre-flop sizes. More often than not, this player is not going to be one of the strongest. And it's always nice to know where the weaker players are at the table. So table 8, we're going to open the King 10 suited. Very easy open here. Table 3, depending on what happens, we're either going to flat or jam. And I think versus this opponent, he's about 25 big blinds effective, and I would assume just about every pair is a plus EV jam for 25 effective cutoff versus big blind. I can double check that as well, but I think it's close regardless. And if it's close and I cover him, then I'm definitely going to go for the jam because I want to play for his bounty. So we get called on table 8 with the King 10. I think this is a pretty good board for us. The rainbow board is pretty good for us. And also, this is just a board where he's not going to connect always. He's not going to have the 9 deuce off. He's not going to have the 7 deuce off. He'll have the suited variations of it, but other than that, he's not really going to have many 2-pair combos. Maybe 9 deuce suited, 7 deuce suited. He's certainly going to have 9-7 suited. But I think that board is just so dry, and from we're opening a very tight range, so I think we can just c-bet that board pretty aggressively. Table 3, you're going to go for the 3-bet. I think this hand mostly 3-bets and sometimes calls, but never folds. So we go for the 3-bet, and obviously a pretty easy c-bet on a board that's pretty good for our range. So I'm just going to bet this for a small size at a high frequency. Unfortunately, we actually had one of the strongest hands we could have and no action, but it is what it is. This folds to us on the button on table 3. We're going to open the King 8 off. So we'll try to move ahead a little bit. Oh, I'm rewinding here somehow. Get used to it, guys. I gotta get used to this this software here, so guess we won't do a whole lot more jumping around for the time being. So yeah, we're gonna open up here with the King 8, and likely on table 2 be defending. Well, we will no longer be defending the Ace 9. Table 3, pretty good flop for our range here. I would say villain's never gonna have aces, kings, 10s, ace, king. So even though it's not a monotone board, I think we could still bet pretty aggressively here. So I'm going to be betting most of the hands in my range here for a small size. Once he calls a turn, I think we're just in showdown mode here. I don't see us getting a whole lot of value from worse hands, and our hand is certainly too strong to bluff with. So we're going to just try to show down. Table 6, I ended up folding the Queen Jack when there's a bounty that's all in. I mean, it is a small bounty, but I could possibly consider flatting there, although I wouldn't normally without a bounty. But I have position, and there's a bounty out there with a half-decent hand, so that could have been a mistake to miss the Queen Jack offsuit on table 6. And versus a super small size on table 3, we just have to call any pair. We only have to be good 1 out of every 6 times there, I think, for us to make a profitable call. So I think we have to call all of our pairs there, and he just happens to have a better hand. That's fine. And table 5, I think versus 1 bet, I may have decided to call, but versus a bet and a call, I think we have to fold. 2 overs of the backdoor flush draw is pretty good, although his range should be a little tighter, betting into 2 opponents instead of just 1. But I may have considered either check calling or check raising there. That might also be a little thin, though. But once a cutoff calls, it's a clear fold. And we did guess right on table 7 that our blue friend here was, with the funky pocket 7 3-bet size, is probably weaker as we see him limping and playing 41% of the hand so far. So I think a safe assessment that he was a recreational. Table 2, kind of a whatever call, I guess. Like, we're not going to ever lose a big pocket threes. We either flop or set it. We don't. We have position here. I think I would even fold the cutoff here. It's close on the button, and the opener I have as a perceived weaker player. So I'm fine with the flat here. I don't think it's a big deal one way or the other. And table 6, basically get the worst turn card after the flop checks around. I guess we're going to go with the check call here. I don't really see much value in raising. I don't see better calling here. I'd certainly check raise some 9x here, and then check raise some flush draws and straight draws. But I think we can just pure call this ace-x combo here. Table 4, we open the ace-queen. I think I'm going to go with a pretty high frequency c-bet here. Pretty good board for our range. Then with the ace on the river on table 7, it's kind of weird because I don't think we have a whole lot of bluffs once we check call the turn. So I think we should almost consider donk leading here. But we decided to check anyway, and this guy's kind of all over the place, so he might just do something nuts anyway. So ended up checking to him, and he goes for this big size. And since I basically have no bluffs here, I think maybe I should just be min-raising here. But again, this being a weaker player, I'm just going to try to get as much money as I can and take his bounty. So I'm just going to jam. Although I do technically think maybe just min-raising is best there, because I really don't see what bluffs we could have in this spot. And we take it down. Obviously, he could be betting a 9 like that. Who the hell knows? But he could have had just complete randomness too. Gonna fold table 8 with the ace 4. I believe table 3 we can open up the ace 8. Probably marking something down on the side for a hand to review. Yeah, so I'll probably do like another 5 more minutes here. As I said, I want to make this into a 2-parter just so you guys can not have something that's so long. You got to get through this, and like I said, please feel free to ask us anything, any questions you have on this, anything we've discussed or hands that I've missed, any input you guys have to make these videos a little better, or just any opinion you have. Just let us know. We'll be happy to answer you back in the Discord. Table 3, we ended up c-betting for a large size on the Jack-8 deuce, which is, I think I can do one or the other. It's a pretty wet board, and our hand's pretty strong, I would say. It's our best ace, or it's our best 8. So I don't mind going for the bigger size there, although I think default would probably be for the smaller size. And again, as I said, if you haven't noticed, I'm really trying to get through each hand as quickly as possible, just because we have so much going on. So apologies if I've been a little incoherent a little bit through this video, but we've got a lot to talk about, and I really want to make sure we get as much information out to you as we can, when things are first starting up. So with the ace jack on table 8, we certainly would have been jamming versus an open, but versus the cutoff jam, I think we have to fold here. I think probably ace queen offers when we start getting in there. Ace jack suited might actually be close, so maybe I'll run that in ICM miser too. So just to see how wide we can be calling in that spot. Table 1, I go for the 3-bet. This could really do either or. Calling or 3-betting would both be fine. But versus a perceived weaker player, I want to be isolating here and trying to play a heads-up pot in position to make sure that we're the one to get the recreational's money. So this is why I really believe that 3-betting here is a far superior play in this particular situation than flatting would be. Table 2, we're going to flat the ace deuce suited. I don't think there's really any other play, especially when somebody else comes along from early position. Table 8, I think queen 3 suited is pretty close to the bottom of our opening range, but we're going to go for the open anyway. And I'm going to call ace 7 suited on table 6 as well. Hand plays pretty well multi-way, so we want to be calling in these positions more than jamming, and probably just not strong enough to be jamming with. I don't hate jamming now that I look at this. It probably have people who are calling a little too wide, so our jam probably works more than it should, but it also plays well post-flop, so I think calling is probably the superior play. I believe this is going to check around. Yep, you're going to check around on the flop. Now, I decided to check on the turn, I remember. But in hindsight, I think I like betting here. We certainly want to have a more polarized size when we're betting into 3 other opponents, which means we're not going to want to bet as wide of our semi bluffs or for our value as if we were heads up. So essentially, since there are 3 people, we want to be betting the very strongest hands of the very best bluff candidates. And I think this is one of our better bluffs. So although I don't think checking on the turn is necessarily a bad play, and it's good to have some diamonds in your checking range on the turn, I think this is one of our better bluffs. So I think I would have preferred betting on the turn there. Something around 2/3 would have been fine. At table 1, we open the Queen Jack. Pretty neutral board. I think this is pretty decent for the big blinds range, and us having no hearts here for a backdoor flush draw makes me want to check a little more than bet. I'm sure we're supposed to mix this hand, but in general, I would just rather bet at a high frequency with the Queen of Hearts or the Jack of Hearts, and then check at a higher frequency without those hearts. With the King here, I mean, this is pretty much an airball bluff, but the King's a very good card for our range. And when villain checks twice, I mean, I'm more than happy to try to take it down with a cheap bluff and then reevaluate on the river. Our hand is obviously worth nothing, so I don't mind being a little aggressive on a perceived good card for us on the turn. Let's see how far we are through this video. 29 minutes, so yeah, I guess we can pause it here, and I'll continue with part 2 in the next video. As I said, guys, please feel free to any question you have. There's no dumb questions out there. Just ask anything that's on your mind, and we'll be happy to get back to you in the Discord and really give you our opinions and try to help you out if you have any questions on anything you've seen here. So again, apologies if it was a little long and a little incoherent, but just trying to get everything in here so we give you guys some really good content before the official release. So anyway, this is Kurt signing off, and I'll see you guys in part 2.